Hello and welcome to another episode of Steelfur Speaks. This time we're just sitting down. So yesterday we had a bit of a chat post-event just about how we felt about the draft format, the ARIA draft format. So you can find that video with me and my team jersey in the hotel room, just going through all those things. And just having a chat about the format of the UK Nationals, how it felt to draft in the middle of the Swiss, how the top 24 worked, the issues with that, how that all felt, and that kind of thing. Today, I'm obviously recording a few videos just while the event is fresh in my mind. So this video is firstly just going to talk through my own impressions on the controversy that happened during the event, what went well, what went badly, the issues. And I want to just start off by saying, so the event was immaculately run. The venue was fantastic. There was food nearby. There was a hotel across the road. The event ran on time both days. It had everything you need for that high-level event. Lots of staff, lots of judges. The transition from constructed to booster drafting was perfect. If you had a judge question, there was a judge there in 2 minutes. The judges were really good at answering, like even specific technical questions. I only made one judge call for something I didn't remember during the event, for a specific interaction, which was Cranial Crush versus Sonata Arcanix. Remember, Cranial Crush says if it crushes you, you can't draw cards. Sonata Arcanix puts those cards into your hand. I wanted just to make sure that the putting of the cards into the hand wasn't classified as a type of card draw preventable by Cranial Crush, and it wasn't. Therefore, when I played Sonata, it didn't work anyway, but because it whiffed. But it would have actually worked even if I had been crushed. So that's just important to understand. So those kind of judge calls were really, really good. Okay. So there's been a lot of controversy going around about certain people on stream making mistakes, how things were punished, whether they were punished correctly, all that kind of level of stuff. And I really think that I want to address this quickly because, as we've talked about before, Fab does have a problem, and all games to an extent have a problem, but Fab has a problem. Fab specifically does have a problem whereby certain regions have got the game a lot earlier than other people. And I mean, looking at New Zealand especially, because a lot of New Zealand people talking online do sometimes have this attitude, and for good or bad, I mean, it has some pros and cons. But some people got this game a lot earlier than other people. And I think it's very important to understand that the Fab as a game, we had that whole online pandemic period where the number of people playing Fab in the UK was quite small, still growing, because people found it online and it worked for them, but was still quite small. And because of that, and only really started to grow during the Monarch period when the pandemic was lifted, people could go to the local game store and actually play the game. So, which was around the April, May, June, July summer period. So we fast forward from, say, then to now, we're actually only talking about a period of 4 or 5 months, and a lot of people would have got in late in the summer, right? That includes a lot of players who went to RTNs and got experience, grinded at their local armories and got an invite to Nationals. That also includes a lot of the people who decided to start judging at Nationals and become one of those players who would work as judges at the event. So we're in a point where the actual meta in the UK is very, very divided. So you've got people like, people you saw at the top tables, like Big Medsai, Simon, Sharif Shaban, Shingo Online, and people like that who have actually been playing for about a year now because they got in October into the online scene through friends that played card games in other countries. And then you've got a lot of people like the champion Matt Fawkes who actually started over the summer. I don't remember when George Rogers started. There were a few other players who started over the summer but were in the top 24 as well. And you have a lot of players like myself who started in between those two and have a mixed level of experience, right? Now, in this setting, a lot of the players with a lot of experience would not be tempted to judge, right? Just because they want to win and want to get the prizes. We were very, very fortunate that the head judge, James Berham, actually started at the same time as Simon. He is friends with Simon, but decided he felt judging to be more rewarding. There wasn't really, and I'll say this because I do know other good players who were tempted by the idea of judging, but didn't get told early enough that there was a reward that justified their time, right? And this is a big problem. And if they had known that there was a New Horizon playmat up for grabs, for example, they might have judged. There was a bit of a problem with LSS, I think, not communicating what the judges would be getting quick enough to get judges involved in the program. LSS really should be shouting from the rooftops what judges are going to get as a reward for judging, and it should be cool. It should be awesome. It should be exclusive. We were talking about the idea that judges should get a special promo if they're level 1 judges, a cold foil version of that promo if they're a level 2 judge, a gold foil version if they're level 3. If you're a level 4 judge, you should get a special like metal etched version of the promo or something really cool. It should be really cool. It should be exclusive. It should be rare enough that a collector is willing to buy that card if you as a judge want to sell it, or you can keep it. And that means that judges can either cash out and get paid for their time, or which happens in all the other games. I mean, judges get paid in boxes in Magic. They turn around, they sell those boxes. It's a system whereby people need to be getting something that is either money to pay for the time investment that it takes to judge, or they need to be getting something that's so cool and exclusive they just want it, right? But LSS need to shout from the rooftop about what those people are going to get, because it's absolutely vital that judges are good and have played the game, right? And this is essentially what the main problem with judging at the weekend was. We had a lot of very good judges that were very knowledgeable about the rules, but because of the time investment it takes to get knowledgeable about the rules in the time frame since a lot of these people started playing the game, a lot of them are not what we would consider to be high level players, or even like really, casually competitive players or anything like that. Or I think many people on the judging team could benefit from playing the game more, so they understand more about the penalties they can apply, whether something is actually a big infraction or a small infraction based on how much it advanced someone's game state. Understanding the difference between missing a blood debt versus missing an embodiment trigger in terms of how much that impacts the game. So missing one blood debt is a lot less impactful to the game than missing an embodiment trigger if you're Briar, because embodiment will let you block massively on the next turn, whereas if you miss one blood debt, it's just 1 health. Like there's lots of like things there. You need to understand at what point the combo Bolton would cheat to get the massive combo off, to understand that when he accidentally opts 1 extra card, when he's got a Luminar Ascension in Arsenal, it's a much bigger cheat than if he accidentally opts an extra card on turn 1, right? For example. Or if a Dash player tries to use Teklo Core without boosting, which happened on stream, like late in the game, when they're really low on resources and they blocked with most of their hand, it's a much bigger infraction than if they try and do it on turn 1 when they've got a 4-card hand and they can just play something out and boost, right? And those are the kind of things that happened a lot during the event, which is why we just want to talk about that, because there's a lot of play mistakes that happened over the weekend, and a lot of that is attributed to the fact that a lot of players in the UK are just new to the game, and a lot of the judges are also new to the game, right? And that's important to understand. That will go away in time. There are also a lot of issues with the rules being, I won't say enforced incorrectly, I will say punishments not being handed out for repeat infractions, right? And a lot of that issue comes from the fact that judges weren't called for a lot of infractions, because the game is still quite casual in a sense in the UK. If someone made a mistake, it was very, very easy for the players who understand the rules to correct the mistake at the table without calling a judge. Now that is, for a casual game that is about sportsmanship and back and forth play and respecting your opponent, the fairest way to deal with an infraction. Your opponent makes a mistake, you say sorry, no, fix it, move on. However, if we are reaching the point of a competitive tournament, those infractions do actually need to be tracked. So you need to call a judge when something goes wrong, so the judge is aware that that person has made a specific type of mistake, whether that is boosting, Teklo coring before you've boosted, Teklo Foundry Heart before you've boosted, don't at me, or, trying to block with the defense reaction when Exude is on. The judges need to be made aware that your opponent has made that kind of infraction, because, and this is where it becomes relevant, if your opponent makes that kind of infraction again in your game, the judge needs to have been told that the first one happened in order to apply the penalty, IP2 penalty, for the second one, right? If you only call the judge when the second one happens, they can't apply the penalty because they did not see the first one. And that is something that as the community, we kind of just need to get used to, at bigger events, there will be a judge at every table. So if something goes wrong and the judge doesn't catch it and you don't and your opponent doesn't catch it, then you say, actually, this went wrong. The judge will be like, okay, that's a warning for you. And then if he does it again, you can apply an IP2 penalty, those kind of things. But at even earlier in the day, if we're holding ourselves to a higher standard, judges need to be called more often to just take note of the fact that a player has made a misplay that could have benefited them if it wasn't caught. And because it was caught, it's worth just noting to see if that happens again in a later game, when again it could have more of an impact on the game. So I think that's kind of just interesting and worth thinking about, is that judges do need to be called more often to resolve problems. But that's also something for LSS directly to address. I think we really need to see kind of like a vision for the competitive game coming out of LSS, where they lay out how they expect judges to be called, how often they expect people to call judges, what they expect to refer to judges. Do they actually have a vision where players are resolving all but particularly huge infractions by themselves, by their joint understanding of the rules? And if you try and play something that you can't do, I just say sorry, no. And if you and then I don't call a judge. But if you try and do something that's quite big, I say, actually, judge, come and please take a look at this. I think my opponent has made a mistake. And just in case they do it again, I want you to be aware of it. They need to kind of give us some guidance, I think, and that will come during this national scene. And this is kind of a point from my last video as well, about the true implications of whether or not Tails is a good sealed and draft set, really became tested when it was given to large numbers of people at a competitive event and at a competitive level. Okay? Now, with that context set up, we've got a fairly new judging team, really one experienced head judge with a lot of gameplay experience. The other judges don't have as much gameplay experience or judging experience, so therefore are reluctant to apply penalties because they don't really understand the depth of the infractions that they're witnessing and how much it impacts the game. With that in mind, we can look at the context of what has actually happened within the games on stream, off stream, etc. at the tournament. And we will realize that the majority of times players have made one or two small gameplay mistakes in games which have been corrected by a small conversation with their opponent. Things have been allowed or not allowed based on the feeling of the game between those two people. Someone might be like, I'm working out my embodiments at the end of every turn. Their opponent might be like, that's fine, it speeds things up. Someone else might be like, no, can we do it now? And the first time that happens, their opponent will start to play correctly. There's a lot of back and forth going on at the tournament because a lot of people are new to it. Now, obviously, when you get up to the top 24, the judge came out and said, look, you're in the top 24 now. I'm expecting to hold all of you to a higher standard. And then you saw a lot more people calling out, well, actually, you missed your trigger on that, therefore I don't have to do it. Oh, you didn't tell me I had to pummel, therefore I don't have to discard a card, right? All this stuff started coming out because it is correct that if a trigger is not announced, you do not have to follow the trigger, right? Now, you can help your opponent by doing it, but you don't have to. I mean, it's within the rules that if your opponent doesn't declare a trigger on one of their abilities, you do not have to activate the trigger because the trigger has to be activated. Snatch hits, I have to say, okay, it hits. I'm adding the draw effect to the stag. I don't have to use those words. I can just say, oh, snatch, okay, it hits. Okay, cool, draw a card. But I have to in some way indicate that I'm triggering the abilities on my cards to get those beneficial triggers. And a beneficial trigger is not the same as a negative trigger, okay? However, and this is where things get kind of interesting. So we have the streamed games, right? We have instances of the streamed games of people triggering their abilities when they couldn't trigger them or incorrectly multiple times. And we have those people not being given appropriate penalties because the judge at the table did not spot the infraction or because it was resolved by the players talking rather than the judge actually issuing a warning or a correction. That is where we get into the area where I think there is a mistake, and I really feel like the judging does need to tighten up for the next nationals. I feel like, for example, if someone tries to trigger their tech, I love this example of the Technical Foundry Heart because I see it all the time, and the judges I've talked to say they see it all the time when they're just walking around the games that are competition. They'll be like, oh, that person hasn't triggered, and just jump in and say, you haven't boosted yet, you can't use that. So it seems to be a fairly common mistake that Dash players make. And I think this is the issue, that when that happens once or twice, that person needs to get a penalty, right? Because the only way that the quality of play improves as a whole for the community is if people have to take responsibility for their mistakes, right? And that's not just your opponent going, no, you can't do it. That is also going, well, you know, you need to have an IP penalty for this, because if you don't, the next time you go up against an opponent who doesn't know to say no, or doesn't say no, or doesn't catch it, you will get away with that, and that will give you an unfair advantage. And that's where things need to start tightening up, and that's what we didn't really see this weekend, which I think LSS needs to address. And I think the main way to address it is more training for judges. It's getting judges playing more games against competitive players and more of an understanding of the decks that they're going to see in the meta. And that just needs to happen so that they can understand the game state that's going on, rather than just individual judge queries that they're asked. Because the judge query side of things isn't the problem. The judges know the rules very, very well. Even at the tournament that just ran, all the judges, I would say, knew the rules very, very well. If you went to them with a question, you got a really good answer. Sometimes they double checked it online, but most of the time they were just like, yeah, that works. No, that doesn't work. Okay, cool. But it's the active judging that needs to develop more. And that can only come through gameplay experience and actually learning how to play the game very intricately yourself, so that you can see the minutiae of, okay, well, he declared an attack with that Rosetta Thorn, but he announced 4 when he hasn't played a non-attack action, right? That's a small infraction that, as an active judge, you need to be able to spot, which you won't do unless you've had experience with those decks and seen how they're going. So that's kind of something that LSS needs to address. With regards to going beyond that, like, it is a difficult decision whether to apply a penalty retroactively for things seen on the stream that weren't caught later on, right? Because, and this is true for all games, players make mistakes. The mistakes aren't caught by either player. It doesn't actually affect the integrity of the tournament. If those mistakes happen and aren't caught, it is up to both players to maintain the game state. The issue is when one player repeatedly makes mistakes that lead to their favor. And I think if there is evidence of that on a stream where someone is repeatedly making mistakes that lead in their favor, you actually do need to start punishing and penalizing that person for sloppy play, and getting a better active judge on that table. Because that does add up over the course of a tournament to repeated mistakes that benefit the player. And unless they are punished, it will not bring them back in line, right? Okay, and that's just the standard we need to get. Even if it is retroactive, even if it is the head judge being told, look, on the stream earlier, a game ago, that person did this 3 times. You know, the active judge on that table needs to watch them. If they do it again, they need to be given an IP2 penalty, or they just need to be given an IP2 penalty now for making that mistake, so they do not make it for the rest of the tournament. They need to know it's not acceptable. They've already won a game potentially by making that mistake. They can't be allowed to do it again. Okay, and that's very important, because on the stream, specifically with the player that won, there were a few instances where things went wrong in their favor, where they accidentally used Shiver twice on a turn, for example. Now, they admitted that was a mistake, but did they win the game because they triggered Shiver twice on one turn without playing Snapshot? Maybe, probably. You know, and there is another instance. I'm not gonna. I mean, I can bring up the recording. Someone sent it to me. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll just put on this recording and we can decide how we feel about it. But it's definitely there is a lot to call into question, which I think would not have happened if the judges were applying more penalties for infractions that were, repeated, right? So let's just put up this video and we can decide how we feel about this, right? I'm looking for a... So this, by the way, is a great stream by Tabletop24. Like a really, really great stream. He streamed all day for 3 days. Just let the players talk. It's very good to just let the players talk. I feel like commentary makes the game a bit more accessible to new players, but what I will say is that let me just turn that off. What I will say is that let me just... All right, I've got this set up now. So the first thing to note, of course, is this big blue dice on the table. Oh, wait. This isn't showing, is it? Let's put display capture on. Right, okay. The first thing to note is this big blue dice on the table. When I played Matt, he said that this dice was to help him remember his tunic trigger. It is important to understand that this is considered an outside assistance aid. The only card that is on the table for him to remember his tunic is tunic. He should never have been allowed to use this dice. I really don't know why he was. I let him during my game because I didn't really care. And he did forget tunic anyway, but the judges, like especially on the streaming tables, really should have like caught it. Because you can't put something on the table to help you remember a trigger. It's just as if you wrote down like remember tunic stupid on your trigger on a piece of paper and put it there. That's considered a mechanical assist or an outside assistance for you to remember how to play the game, and it's really just not acceptable. But it was allowed, and that's okay. But let's just watch what happens then once we go from Dyson's turn. And I put on the audio so you guys can listen too, though I'll turn it up because it'll be a bit quiet.
Got one card, Arsenal, no resource floating?
No resources floating.
So the instance we're looking for starts on Matt's turn, but I think it's just worth.
Big dice.
Is it representing anything?
Absolutely not.
Can we not have it on the game state?
I'd really like it to be there.
Okay.
It makes me think about my tunic. So it's definitely.
Okay.
So you can see there he's just saying, it makes me think about my tunic, which isn't actually, an appropriate thing to do. Like, you can't just have something there that makes you think about another card. And that is against the rules. So that's just one instance of, rules just like not being enforced as well as they think they should. The judge should have heard that and been like, wait a second, actually, it's not appropriate. So that's one instance where the rules weren't understood and weren't properly enforced by the judge. The other instance I want to draw attention to happened during round one, so players were still quite fresh to the tournament. But it is important that if you miss a trigger, you don't do that trigger yourself without announcing it to your opponent. And I think that is important because effectively, we see here is just an illegal play, right?
Yep.
We see the attack hit, the Entwined Lightning, at 55 minutes. We see him come in with the sword. At this point, he hasn't applied the embodiment token from the Entwined Lightning. His opponent is now looking at his hand, really deciding what to block. And we see Matt realize he hasn't done it and tick up the trigger, right? He has just applied a trigger, missed trigger, while his opponent is not paying attention to the game and not announced that he has done it. That is a massive, massive rules violation. And it kind of just needs to be acknowledged, because if this is pointed out to the judge, there's another how many rounds of this tournament on Saturday? Because this was Saturday. There was another 14 rounds of this tournament, and in the first round we have a blatant example of not actually calling triggers. And the issue is that we know he's aware of this trigger because later on in the same game he doesn't let his opponent tick up the embodiment after taking damage after he skipped the attack. So it's just really important to really spot this stuff. We can't, you can't just really carry on and get away with it. Now you'll notice that, and I think this is very important, and I want to kind of underscore this for the end of this video, that I am talking about instances where the rules were not applied. I am not going on a big rant about specific players or whether or not someone should have their, titles taken away from them. And there's a very, very simple reason for that. I do not feel that it is my place, right, as a commentator on the game, regardless of what my private opinions may be. And I think, because I personally believe that players should play to a higher standard, but I myself have made mistakes during this weekend. I have taken some of them back. I've taken some of them on the chin. And I have done some. I have fixed some of them quickly, because I play by chess rules, which is very simple. Which is if the card hits the table and you start applying the effects, then that is when the ability is triggered. But if someone says, I play this, is putting it down and then says actually wait, or is saying I'll pitch this and is putting it down but then says actually wait, then they get to change their mind because they're halfway through doing something, right? And it benefits me as a player who likes to play quick games to allow people to be halfway through something and change their mind, because that means that they make decisions quicker because they start talking about something and announcing something, and then if they don't do it, it's fine, but sometimes they finish doing it and they don't have to worry that they have to say everything perfectly, right? They can just be like, oh, I'll pitch this, wait, no, actually, let's pitch that. You know, if nothing has changed in the game state, I'm happy for the person to be like, actually, let's do it this way, right? As long as they're not taking loads of time on each decision to think about things and do those kind of things, right? But these kind of mistakes are more important and they do need to be addressed. Again, there is a reason, though, that I'm not calling out specific players, even though a lot of these mistakes were made by Matt Fawkes, who did eventually win and go 15-0, which does need to be addressed. But that is because it's not my place as a proper commentator really to drag people's names through the mud or go on a witch hunt, you know, even if I'm it's just not, right? LSS has this video. They have a lot of feedback from the head judge at the event, who did a fantastic job. They have a lot of feedback from players like myself about the things that went wrong, and it's up to them to decide what they are going to do, right? Whether that is to be like, well, no, I mean, he's clearly done something wrong on stream, you know, something needs to happen. Whether to just say, okay, the next Nationals needs to be judged tighter. There need to be more IP penalties applied for these mistakes. More people need to call judges and let them know about the first mistake so that they can punish the second one. You know, maybe all of this stuff needs to happen. And hopefully LSS will take this to heart and work on developing the judge program, giving better awareness of what's being given for judges, giving judges better prizes and rewards, and ultimately making the tournament seem better because of it, right? That's what I want to come out of UK Nationals. The game is still in its infancy, both in the UK especially, and in other parts of the world. You cannot expect things to run perfectly from the start. Judges and players need time to grow into the game, to get really good with triggers, and in a year or two's time, if this is properly addressed, this won't be the problem. We're not going to be focused on it. And I want to end on a good note. There's a reason that no one is complaining about how the event was organized, or the space being bad, or, you know, the event organizers being bad, or the judge quality being bad, outside of a few specific instances. And that's because the entire thing was excellent, right? The entire event ran smoothly. Everyone I know who went had a fantastic time, win or lose. I got to hang out with my friends, play loads of Flesh and Blood, see some of my friends do well, maybe not make it across the finish line, and everyone I know was having the same experience and was just so hyped to just be there, be drafting, really just enjoying the whole weekend. So take the salt that you're getting from people who weren't there with a pinch of practicality and realism from myself to wrap up this video. The event was fantastic. The feedback is overwhelmingly positive. UK Nationals was a resounding success. It's up for LSS to decide what they want to do about the things that happened during the event to make sure that the next event is better. It doesn't mean that the UK Nationals wasn't fantastic. You know, the people who won did so because they made the right deck choices, drafted really well, and there were a few mistakes made by everyone throughout the entire tournament because it was 15 rounds of drafting in Swiss, and it was a long 2 days, but it was a really good event. So I'm leaving you with that positive note. As always, I've been Steelfur. You know, like and subscribe to the video. There will be more content coming out about the UK Nationals and other Nationals over the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that. I will be doing deck tech reviews of my own deck and other decks to watch over the next few days, so stay tuned for that as well. And as always, you know, if you like this channel, I do have a Ko-fi page, which is basically Patreon, but just different. I pay less tax on that one. So, you know, feel free to go over there and support me. I would love to do some more stuff with that. So yeah, that's it. I had a great time. I hope whatever Nationals you are going to, you know, you also have a good time. And if you're not going to Nationals and you are watching at home, do just take everything with a bit of, you know, a bit of chill. It's not always, you know, we don't need things to get super stressed from a distance, even if you're not there, right? Okay? So thanks a lot for watching and have a great day.